Friday was like any other day. At least that's how it started. It was a little bit chilly, but it was pretty normal. That was until Valve did something completely non-Valve-like of them and announced 3 products on Wednesday of all days. So I am going to record this on Wednesday, hopefully have it out by Friday, and probably have shorts tomorrow. So let's talk about what they have announced, because I'm a little bit hyped and a little bit worried, and I'll explain why. So let's get right into it. Hello and welcome, everyone. This is, I guess, the News-ish show back for a special episode because hell froze over. Valve actually announced things, which happens so rarely that it is actually breaking news. So Valve actually announced 3 products today. 1, the sequel to the Steam controller that we've been waiting for. You know, I've really been missing the Steam controller, and having something brand new with Steam Deck controls is pretty cool. The brand new Steam machines, because those needed to come back. And what I've honestly been waiting for, the sequel to the Valve Index, the Steam Frame. That is the official name of it. And all 3 of these products are cool, and I'm probably going to get all 3 of them. They're actually all on my wish list already, since you can wish list them on Steam. And all 3 of them have their own nuances and reasons why I'm excited for them. So let's actually start from the least excited to the most excited, and then kind of move into the why I'm a bit concerned. Let's start with the Steam Controller 2, or they're just calling it the Steam Controller now. Either way, I am one of the few people who actually had the original Steam Controller. Yes, with the giant circular trackpads. And as an early adopter of the Steam Deck, I actually thought that this was going to come out at least a year or 2 ago, because it was almost a logical next step. They had perfected the comfort of the Steam Deck, and now they can take that and put it into a controller and do exactly what the Steam controller was supposed to do, which was to be a controller that could work for just about any game. Using custom mapping, you could make it work for mouse and keyboard games. It would also work with something like a point and click game, or just a game that has horrible mapping in general, because you would have the extra flexibility of Steam's remapping system. So I've actually been waiting for a controller like this for a while. And that's because in many ways, I want the Steam Deck to be like the Nintendo Switch. I want to be able to dock it, grab a controller, and go. And with third-party controllers, you always had that tiny issue with not having all of the same buttons that are mapped on the handheld device itself. And so some of the workarounds that you would come up with would not be functional on a standard Xbox controller. And this was a problem that I tried to overcome on both my Steam Deck and my ROG Ally. For the ROG Ally, I actually bought the very expensive Ryujin Pro, thinking that that would be similar to having the keyboard mapping and stuff that was already built into the ROG Ally. And it just didn't work that way. And it was actually one of the biggest disappointments of it. So I'm really happy to see this new Steam controller, and it looks like it's going to have all of the same functionality that I liked about the Steam Deck built right in. For controls, this thing is pretty much exactly the same as the Steam Deck. We've got our dual analog sticks, and they are the new magnetic analog sticks that were done in the most recent revisions of the Steam Deck. We have 2 trackpads, we have a D-pad, and we have ABXY, along with Start, Select, Steam, right left bumpers, triggers, and 2 back buttons on each grip. The grip buttons and the sticks themselves are capacitive, which will allow you to use, say, gyro aiming when you're resting on the stick, as opposed to having to move the stick around as much, which is actually really nice and is a feature that is pretty prevalent on, say, the Nintendo consoles, specifically with their Pro controller. And gyro aiming is one of the best benefits of the original Steam controller, and one of the reasons that some people actually still used it competitively, because that can give you a bit of an edge as opposed to just standard controller controls on their own. One thing that really stood out to me is their solution for charging and connectivity. So their charging puck and connection puck are one and the same. And using magnets, you can actually dock the controller directly onto it when you're not playing. Granted, it is only going to need a charge for I think it's like 38 hours or something, 34 hours is what they quoted, which is an insanely long period of time. But having the connection piece also be the charging piece and you don't have to unplug anything is amazing. And Razer, you should take notes, because if your mouse and keyboard actually work the same way, it'd be a lot less frustrating to use them wirelessly. So overall, I am actually hyped for this. It's not really a joke. I really do want the Steam controller too. And I'm hoping that this lands in the $70-ish range, though I wouldn't be surprised if this is an $80 or $90 controller, seeing how other first-party controllers have been this year. Now, the Steam machines. This is crazy that they are back, because they failed the first time. In fact, actually, the Steam controller also failed. They released around the same time. Now, I didn't have a Steam machine because I already had a gaming PC, and it was very hard for me to justify getting any of the Steam machines, to be honest. But this one looks cool. It's supposed to be 6 times more powerful than the Steam Deck. It is running a semi-custom AMD APU, and it is packed to the gills with cooling. Most of this case is dedicated to cooling and the heatsink. And it's cute. It's a little cube. The Gabe Cube. I stole that from someone in the comments section. I'm sorry. But it looks really nice. There's a interchangeable front that can be customized, which I do like. I do think having a nice mesh front would be probably best for cooling performance on this thing. Now, something that I was able to see, because I was looking at the stuff that's not necessarily the press release, but the public stuff, is I was able to get a glimpse at the I/O. And right now it looks like we have a DisplayPort, HDMI, 2 USB Type A, and 1 USB Type C, along with an Ethernet, which is very similar to the Steam Deck dock, minus 1 USB. Fortunately, the new Steam machine is fully compatible with this new Steam controller without even having to use the puck. And this is through a built-in wireless puck that will allow the controller to actually connect through the 2.5 gigahertz wave. And I like that. It means that having the controller work on both the PC and on, say, your Steam machine would be totally viable. Now, the Steam machine is designed for the living room, but they did show it on a monitor, and they did show it as a nice, interesting Linux productivity device as well. Now, I do think that that's going to be fairly limited, because we're going to be relying on SteamOS, which in and of itself has limited support for things outside of gaming, but it could be really cool for, say, developers who want to develop for specifically a Steam Deck, or to make sure that a game is compatible with a Steam Deck without having to resort necessarily to loading onto the portable device. It's kind of like a dev kit. And I am actually very excited for it because, 1, small form factor, love that. And 2, I have actually been wanting a Linux machine that isn't tied to any of my computers, so that I could have a nice test case for certain games and compatibility testing, which is something that I wanted to do on my secondary channel, which is more about gaming, when it comes to devices that aren't, say, the Nintendo Switch 2. There's an addressable RGB light bar in the front, and that thing's actually kind of cool because that's a new feature of SteamOS. RGB is not something that they had prior. So overall, I'm very excited to see what this has going for it. But if it conflicts in release with the Steam frame, it's gonna have to wait, because the Steam frame, well, let's just say it bumped Oculus off of the purchase list for next year. So let's talk the big one, the Steam frame. What is it? Well, if you were to ask for my wish list for a dream budget VR headset, as the rumors did say, the Steam frame is going to be a standalone VR headset, but it does have a cool trick up its sleeve that we'll get to in a little bit. It's powered by a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, which I think does put it as one of the more powerful devices on the market. It has inside-out tracking, so unfortunately no more base stations. This does come with brand new controllers that I'm a little bit more excited for now that I've heard a little bit more about them. They may look like standard Quest 3 controllers, but they're more like the Quest Pro controllers plus the Valve Index knuckles, because they actually have capacitive touch on the grips themselves, meaning you get full finger tracking. There is an optional grip that you can install onto the controllers so that they actually feel like knuckles as well in your hands, despite being a fair bit smaller. They are battery powered through a single AA, and that was able to be seen in a clip from Linus Tech Tips. Now, one of the cool things they added was they added bumpers to the controllers. That's right, you got both a trigger and a bumper, and that is to maintain compatibility with the Steam controller, because one of the features that this thing has is it's able to wirelessly stream directly from your PC. And this feature is actually really fascinating. So apparently it runs off of the Wi-Fi 7 band, And this is actually a separate antenna than the one that it uses for connectivity, which is a Wi-Fi 6E band. And then there is also Bluetooth, which is also another separate antenna. And they actually have them spaced out quite a bit so that they don't interfere. The Wi-Fi 7 antenna does require that there is no walls between you and the host device, and there is a dongle that you will have to have in your PC in order to run it at its full capacity. And you're probably wondering, wireless VR hasn't been great. Because it isn't. It just isn't. And so how did Valve get around that? Well, that is through the other thing that they built into this headset, which is eye tracking, and a cool new feature that they are calling foveatic streaming. Now, much like foveatic rendering, it's taking the data from your eye tracking and only sending the maximum density of pixels to where your eyes are actually looking. So essentially, they can render the rest of the things that you're not looking at in lower detail, and therefore lowering the package size that has to be sent to your headset. The headset itself is actually pretty compact, and the actual processing module is very small. There are face cushions, adaptable cushions, and stuff like that. Pancake lenses, so it keeps the device nice and small. The headrest itself on the back is actually where the battery is, which is very similar to the Vive Focus Vision, which I have right over there. And the head strap has audio built into it as well. One of the cool features that Valve didn't really touch on, nor did Linus, because nothing's actually announced for it yet, is there's a PCIe slot in the front of the headset. Now, this could be for inside-out facing cameras because this thing does only have black-white sensors. Or, as I was looking at it, I thought very quickly that that is going to be for face tracking. So you could potentially, in the future, if it's supported, have both face and eye tracking built into this headset, along with finger tracking, which pretty much checks off everything that I would want for a headset specifically to do what I do in VR. Now, here's where things get interesting. This is going to be running SteamOS as well, which means that Valve has actually made a version of SteamOS that works in VR. That is a big deal. VR and Linux in the same sentence don't happen very often, and that's because it doesn't work very well. There are a couple projects to get it working that have unfortunately not been very successful, and so I am actually a little bit hyped that they are going to be doing this. Additionally, if you do need PC VR compatibility, that wireless streaming is through PC VR, and you can connect it to just about any desktop and hopefully have full access to your Steam library. So you're probably wondering, what are the specs of this thing? Well, they're actually very similar to a MetaQuest 3. So other than having the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, the resolution is 2160 by 2160 per eye, which is a nice square format, with an FOV of 110 degrees. The refresh rate is 72 to 120 hertz, and they are experimenting with 144 hertz on the device. Of course, the faster the refresh rate, the faster the battery is going to run out. The screen is an LCD, so you aren't going to get the nice instant response times that you would get from OLED or the dark blacks from OLED, but what you will get is a brighter image, which is one of the benefits to LCD still in VR headsets. One of the things that I do want to touch on is when talking about the controllers, Linus mentioned that there is IMU tracking built into the controllers. And I hope that this solves the dreaded problem of Quest hands. What are Quest hands? Well, when you have a headset like the Quest, you've got your cameras positioned, and it's actually very similarly positioned. God, this thing's dusty. Sorry, this thing's very dusty. You've got your cameras actually positioned very similarly to what they would be on the frame. And the problem is these cameras down at the bottom, they're angled down and out away from your sides. And so it makes it so that when you're playing something like VR Chat, which is a social VR game, you gotta have your controllers out far enough that this can see it and react to them so that you don't end up having your hands go in all sorts of directions. It's actually a problem that I've been facing on this headset specifically as well. And I did actually say in my initial unboxing of the Vive Focus Vision that having IMU trackers could mitigate some of these problems. Fortunately, it looks like Valve is the one who's taking that into consideration. So we'll have hand tracking and the IMU tracking, which should help us actually have a pretty decent social VR experience. Now, with everything all packed together, and given the fact that it is so closely spec'd to the Meta Quest 3, I wouldn't be surprised if Valve is targeting a $500 price point for this. And I kind of hope that they are. Granted, I do think that it's going to land around a $650 price point for the 250 gigabyte model. There's a 1 terabyte model that I think is probably going to be just under $1,000, just because that seems like the jump that we would be dealing with there. And if you're curious on how this compares to the rest of its competition, the Meta Quest 3 has a slightly lower resolution of 2040 by 2208. It's got a weird resolution, and caps out at 120 frames per second, 110 degrees field of view, and doesn't have eye tracking. So this thing just kind of beat it there. Granted, I don't think this has hand tracking or any reported hand tracking. The Vive Focus Vision, which is priced at $1,000 plus, 1,200 I think is its current pricing. It's been on sale for 1,100. Hey, that thing's expensive. That has a higher resolution of 2448 by 2448 and a refresh rate of 120 with a 120 degree field of view. And that does come with eye tracking, so it's kind of comparable in that regard. And then, of course, the big screen beyond, let's say the E model, which is the one that I've got coming already, has 2560 by 2560. It's mini OLED, 90 hertz, and 116 degrees field of view. So it is below the Vive Focus Vision and the big screen beyond in spec, but it's right around the same point as the Quest 3, which, with the added benefit of having SteamOS and the wireless connectivity, might actually make this the more preferred headset for standalone VR. That is, unless you really want the Oculus exclusives, which is something that I think Valve is actively trying to fight with this headset. Now, I did say that I was worried about something, and this is actually, well, I actually made a video of this on Lesser Than Cake not too long ago. With Valve stepping away from base station VR, it does leave a company like Big Screen in a very awkward position, because not only did they step away, but I checked, HTC is also not making their base station headset either anymore. So both the Vive Pro 2 and the Valve Index are no longer on the market. And that's concerning for a couple reasons, because the base station 2s were designed for the Valve Index and the Vive Pro 2. Currently, you could still buy base stations, and I think that HTC is going to keep making them. I'm hoping they keep making them, because if not, it's going to make everybody who's waiting for their big screen beyond, unfortunately, have to source either used or, unfortunately, very highly marked up aftermarket. And that doesn't do anything for the controllers, which is another problem. So again, the two companies that were making controllers that would work with the big screen were Valve and HTC. Now, you could probably use Shift-Dolls controllers as well. They even have one that looks like Knuckles. But if you want finger tracking, you're going to have to get a hold of Knuckles. And that might be a problem, because Valve's no longer going to be making them. So we're going to be finding ourselves in a very awkward situation in the next couple of months as the product starts to wane out, where Big Screen isn't going to have any controllers or base stations. And that either is going to force them to have to completely adapt and create a brand new headset, or they're going to have to talk to Valve about what at least Valve said to Linus, because Linus did bring this up. And I think he is honestly asking Valve point blank this question because he sees the same problem I do. And he asked, with you guys dipping out of this, who's going to manufacture these things? And so they said that they're looking for somebody to do it. And I hope that means that they're talking to someone like Big Screen to maybe make the product in the future. Because without it, unfortunately, what would be the best PC VR headset is kind of dead. Well, not dead, but screwed until they can get a reasonable solution. And so that is what worries me, because I have a Beyond coming. I have the 2E on its way, and I'm doing a video on it. I have base stations myself. I actually somehow got a hold of some extra base stations to replace the ones that broke. And so I have like, I have this thing coming that I'm hoping I'm going to get many, many years out of, but nothing's stopping my base stations from just dying again and screwing me. And so I'm personally worried. Like, I have a vested interest in seeing what happens next. And I really do hope what happens next is that another company takes it up and we continue to have it. Or Valve makes it open source and the open source community does what the open source community does, and we don't have to worry about it because there's always somebody making something at some point. Now, the reason I don't think that it's going away entirely, especially with the base stations, is because HTC cares too much about the pro market. And what do I mean by that? Well, so believe it or not, HTC's Vive trackers are used in a lot of professional applications. When I say a lot of professional applications, I don't think you realize how many. Like, you need a camera tracked for specifically positional tracking data, you're probably using a Vive tracker. And you're not going to use a Vive tracker Ultimate because you need that to be precise. And the only way to get that precise is with laser tracking. So hopefully that professional application is what keeps the Vive trackers and the base stations from ever truly going away. And then getting a new controller, I feel, is going to be easier than getting the base stations recreated. Let's just hope that that's the direction that we're going to be going with this, just because I would really hate to be in a situation where I'm recommending a headset to a bunch of people and there's no way for them to even use it. That would be extremely disappointing. Oh, I just realized I didn't actually put a price on the Steam Machine. I'm going to guess $900 for the Steam Machine. I don't know, it just feels right. I mean, it doesn't feel right, but they did say it was going to be competitively priced to a PC. So I'm going to say 900 to 1,000 for the Steam Machine. So yeah, those are the pricings that I've come up with. They're not really the price because they haven't announced the price yet, just to be honest, guys. But overall, I'm very excited for these things, and I actually can't wait to put my hands on them. When they do finally get announced with their release dates, it's going to be sometime in 2026. They said Q1, which could mean anywhere between January to like February, March, somewhere around there, maybe even April. So it's going to be in Q1. We'll see what happens, but I'm super excited for the VR headset, the Steam Frame. And I'm actually surprisingly very excited for the Steam controller. I'll probably be getting both of those the fastest. Really depends on how they launch these. If they launch them all at once, I'm gonna have to pick and choose. And I will obviously pick the VR headset. But yeah, that's where I'm gonna end it today, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Wolfie, out.